Red Spider is complete, and it was pretty fun putting this one together. I didn't have a guidebook, of course, because this one's all kind of freehand. Kind of put this together with parts I had and just seeing things I needed and picking them up as I went through it. This is an AX10 Scorpion, the old school one, not like the Ridgecrest or the Deadbolt that's out. It doesn't have too much left from the original Scorpion build, just the chassis, the twin plates, the bottom skid plate, the battery mount, and the little mounts that hold the battery are pretty much all that's left from the original Scorpion build. Of course, the rims are different, axles are different, and everything else. So I'm just going to go through this a little bit before I get it out and do my test run and get it all dirty and mucked up. And just talk about what I went through to get this one built.
Team Baxter.
I'm going to start with the tires. I've got these Pitbull Rock Beasts on here. Really like these tires, and this is the third vehicle I've used these on with great results on all the vehicles. On my little test run with this truck, they did really good. I'm really happy with them so far. A little bit of rubbing as I turn. They hit this shock body here a little bit. I don't know if you can kind of see what's going on, but there it's rubbing right there just a little bit on the shocks. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. I may have to use a little bit of wheel wideners on this thing to get it right, but really happy with the tires so far. I've got them mounted on an off wheel here. These are sealed wheels with a red ring to match the build. You can see that kind of air kind of sitting just up in there, sealed to keep the water out. It's just a personal preference, something I like to do, keep my tires sealed. I feel like the performance is a little bit better with the sealed. They're using Pitbull stock foams, very soft. In this case, I wanted to keep that plush to kind of grip and crawl over things. If I find that it's too soft, I may upgrade to some crawler innovations, but we're gonna run it and see how it goes first. So on the front and the rear of this vehicle, I have RC four-wheel drive axles. These are Bully axles, and they're currently discontinued. This is an all-metal axle with steel gears on the inside. Very beefy, robust axle. They come very bare bones. You kind of have to put your own links on there. Not much lube in there either. You kind of have to make sure you get it lubed up real well. There's another shot of this monstrous axle here. Of course, as I said, they're motor on axle, and just behind this servo and the gearbox, there's a 55 turn Axial motor on there. Same thing going on both sides, the front and the rear. This is in the front and the rear. Both have motor on axle, Bully axles, and 55 turn motors in there. And they're not as slow as you would think. They're moving pretty good with the Bully gear ratio, so I'm pretty happy with the performance there, just from my little test runs around the parking lot and out in the yard and all. So those are working pretty good. You can see right there on top of this axle is mounted a Hi-Tech 5645 MG servo. This is basically the same servo as Hi-Tech's waterproof line, only non-waterproof. And I've went ahead and opened this up and put a little dielectric grease inside, covered the board, cleaned it up, greased the seals, and greased the output shaft at the top where the servo gears come out. Done my own little waterproofing, not much else. We'll see how it runs. I generally just use silicone. Wanted to try a little something different on this project. If you've been following the build, you saw how I kind of covered the board and greased it up, got it closed up, cleaned up, and mounted, and here it is. I don't plan on this project seeing extensive underwater work, but I want to be able to run it underwater if I need to and come through and do what I need to. I'd find that my trucks aren't as fun when I can't run them underwater and submerge them, so I make sure they all are, for the most part. So I went with this servo instead of a waterproof version simply because it's black and it matches the rest of the build. And sitting on that servo is a Offna servo horn. Comes with that little countersunk screw. It just so happens to have a little orangish red ring I thought that looked pretty neat on the build. So that's the servos, and again, that's going on the front and the rear. Both sides have that high-tech 5645 MG sitting on there. This servo has a decent amount of torque, not the most, so I'm running a Castle BEC set at 6 volts to get kind of the most I can out of these two servos, and that's what's going on with the steering. Also, as I briefly mentioned before, custom links. I had to order these from RC 4-wheel drive. Top link is just a little bit too long, so I've got my servo horn offset a little bit. If you notice, it's just a little bit off at center point, but that's okay, and it runs just fine, so not big of a deal. Not too big of a deal there. The electronics are a bit of a mess at this stage, as I want to make sure everything is running before I tightly secure everything down. It's down for the most part. The receiver box needs a little tape to kind of hold it in place, but what you're seeing going on here is a lot of little extra wires hanging out, just because I haven't zip tied them into place in case I need to move anything, change any parameters. A lot of things have been changing during this build, and if anything changes on my test run, I don't want to have to unzip a whole bunch of everything to get to work. So do my test run, and then I'll tighten all this down. Twin sidewinders, they're each on their individual channel on this 4-channel Spectrum receiver, along with the servos each being on their own individual channels. This is an AVC receiver, but I have the AVC turned off, as I don't want to deal with that. I don't need the computer turn in my truck for me or anything. So AVC off, servos on independent channels, ESCs on independent channels, and that allows me to let the front or the rear freewheel at any given point. With the flick of the switch, I can freewheel front or rear, or crab steer, regular steer, rear steer, or 4-wheel steer. So very helpful with the 4-channel receiver. All I do is plug it in on the respective channels, and then with the Spectrum DX4 it just lets me flick on these options. Not sure how easy or difficult this is on a different system, but that's my system and it works pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. The battery trace is just below the electronics. You can see the 2 battery straps that I put on there. I got these myself. They're recommended from my local hobby shop. These are Scorpion, and they hold very well, almost too well. I can't even get the straps loose very often, but I guess I'd rather them hold tightly than be weak and slip off. They have some sort of coating that allows it to really grip the battery, and it holds it down very well. So I'm really impressed with these Scorpion battery ties. They work very well. Made the battery plate out of a spare piece of Kydex. Not much going on there except for a couple of slots, and it's mounted on a couple of bars on the chassis, and just enough space for the battery to kind of slip up under there. For suspension, I'm using G-Mate G-Transition shocks, or GenFet G-Transition shocks. These are definitely not my favorite shocks to build, but I have to say they perform pretty good once they're assembled, and they work just as good as you would expect them to. Terribly difficult build process. I know some people who said they weren't so hard, but I've built a lot of shocks, and those are definitely not the easiest shocks to build. But as I keep saying, once they get together, they work pretty good, and that's why I used them on this project. Also because they're red and they look great with the project itself. So that's a main reason why I really wanted to use these shocks. Of course, I used them all the way around. They used their own balls, and that's why they're blue, so kept that the way it was. There's a lot going on in this build. There's things everywhere, a lot of things all over the place. As I said, I'll get these wires tightened down a little better once I do a couple test runs and see how well it goes, and see if I want to keep anything or move anything out of this build. The last thing is this gate crasher body from J Concepts. I painted this long ago, long before I even started the build. Didn't like the results then. I don't like the results so much now, but it's starting to kind of grow on me. The body definitely fits, and it's definitely a crawler style body, and it provides me all the room for articulation that I need. I painted it to go well with the body. It's just a kind of a hard body to swallow, but it's coming together. It's starting to stick for me, and like I said, it goes really well with the build. Minimal stickers going on here. I got a smoke and red tint going on in the windows. Just a little bit of red accent here and there. A little see-through net there. And there's a little spider there that you can barely see. Along with a little bit of flake accent on the bottom, along the bottom panel. There's a lot going on in the body, but it's still a little bit understated. I used this with liquid mask, just kind of practicing a little bit, and that was the result. I'm going to end up keeping this until I can find something better. I've toured it with many ideas looking for bodies for this thing, but nothing seems to fit right. With it being so slender, this body really goes well with it. You can see the looking down it, it's really narrow. It's got a really bizarre kind of special look to it. So not sold on it, but that's what I'm using at this point, and that's what's on it. So I'm pretty happy with this build overall. I can't complain about it. I really enjoyed putting this together. It's pretty neat to kind of follow your own manual, and never got frustrated. Put things together, took them apart, figured it out. Everything works well, except for the little bit of rub that I'm experiencing just because I chose such large tires. I don't see any problems. It is a little bit low, but I designed it that way. I have plenty of high crawlers. I kind of wanted to keep this one low and see how well it does. I'm really inspired by how well other recent builds I've done that are really low. I'm really inspired by how well they're getting over obstacles. So kind of wanted to keep the same theme here, although this one is very heavy, so it might perform a little bit different. Quite a bit different from my AX10 Ridgecrest, which sits a lot higher and kind of has a wider stance on it with those AR60 axles from Axial. So the next thing to do is get this one out and see how well it does.